Welcome to the 2020 St. Albans History and Mystery Tour. We want to start off by saying we do hate that this year had to be a virtual edition. However, in the interest of safety during COVID-19, we decided that was the best interest for both our volunteers and for you. So welcome to our short video about the haunted history of St. Albans. And welcome to 2020. Where reality is the scariest story of all. If you enjoyed this video, please consider sharing it with your friends. It's free for everyone to view.
St. Albans' first known inhabitants were Native Americans. They were here dating all the way back to 9000 BC. That leads archaeologists to believe that this may be one of the longest continually inhabited settlements in North America. Right here in St. Albans, West Virginia. You can see the mound behind me, most likely built by those Native Americans. The flag on top. Another really interesting site here is the ivy that you see directly behind me. It's covering up a stump that was part of a tree that was the site of St. Albans' only known lynching. The lynching happened in the 1870s and made news all the way from California to Paris. Now, another interesting point here, right behind me, when you'll see these 7 markers, these are 7 sons of St. Albans whose lives were lost in the Civil War. In the 1780s, in what is now St. Albans and what was then the wilderness of Virginia, on the banks of the Coal and Canal River, was built a fort, Fort Tackett, by my 7 great-grandfather, Lewis Tackett, and his brother Christopher. On August 26, 1790, Lewis Tackett's daughter Keziah, my 6th great-grandmother, and her husband John Young welcomed their first child, Jacob Reed Young, into the world. The celebration would be short-lived, however, because on that very night, Native Americans attacked Fort Tackett. And there were about 27 settlers at the fort at the time, and John decided he was not waiting until morning like the rest of them wanted to fight back against the Native Americans, probably the Shawnee, by the way. So he scooped up his wife, who was holding their young son Jacob, less than a day old. He ran out past the Native American arrows, ran to the riverbank, stole one of their canoes, and paddled 15 miles upriver to what is now Charleston, was then called Fort Lee. His instincts for survival were keen because that night the Native Americans burned the fort and no one else living in it survived. So the interesting thing is the fort is no longer there. It's been replaced by 84 Lumber. All that's left of it is a historic road marker telling the story. But people in that neighborhood will report, even to this day, hearing screams, children crying, and Native American war cries. One has to wonder if it's the spirits of the people who were involved in that attack on either side. Behind me, you'll see what is now a great restaurant, Angela's on the River. But once upon a time, it was a home built by the Smith family, then purchased by the Chilton family. It was built in 1847, and the handrails in the restaurant are original to the house. So there is one interesting thing that's happened here of the paranormal since it's been a restaurant that I want to share with you. The mirrors came with the house, and many of them date back well into the 19th century. So an employee noticed a set of fingerprints on one of the antique mirrors, and she began to clean it off with Windex. Well, a few seconds later, the fingerprints reappeared. She cleaned it again. This time, handprints appeared, and there were witnesses, ladies and gentlemen, to this. She cleaned the handprints, did it multiple times, and finally, the witnesses report a woman's hand appeared in the mirror, looking as if it was trying to escape from the mirror. And immediately they took all the mirrors out of the house that had come with it and put them out on the street for people to pick up, because they wanted them out of that house and out of their restaurant. So as soon as they put them outside and went back in, they heard a loud banging at the door. This continued all night. The next day when they came back, the mirrors were gone, and no paranormal activity has occurred since. You have to wonder if the treasure hunter who picked that antique mirror up might be experiencing the same things right now. Welcome to St. Mark's Episcopal Church, one of our churches in town that's on the National Historic Registry. This particular church was built in 1847 to replace Bangor Parish, which burned a few years before, and which was started in 1825 by Philip Thompson. This one was on land donated by Philip Thompson. So it has an interesting history in and of itself, in that it was used during the Civil War by the Union Army, both as a horse hospital and a hospital for humans. It was repaired, and it's used occasionally by the church members even now, even though they have a larger church to attend. So one interesting paranormal story to go with this is one of my friends, who's my most skeptical friend about the paranormal, was walking out the back door of this church one day, and on the playground area she saw two men dressed in what looked like Civil War uniforms. She walked toward them and called out to them. As soon as she did, they disappeared into thin air. She still says she doesn't believe in ghosts, with the exception of those two Civil War soldiers. Welcome to the Hereford Burdette house, built in 1918 by local merchant C.D. Hereford. Mr. Hereford's wife, Anna Raw Hereford, was from Missouri. In fact, she was from the same area from whence Frank and Jesse James and many members of their gang hailed. She moved here to West Virginia after she married Mr. Hereford, and he opened a general store on Main Street. One day in September, in the late 1800s, she went down to visit her husband's store. She was talking to the teller when two men in bandana masks came into the store and hurriedly exited as soon as they saw her. A gentleman from the town who was hanging out on Main Street was heard to have heard them say, "We've got to get out of here. That was Parson Roth's daughter, and she might have recognized us." That very same day, the James gang went on to rob the Bank of Huntington for $10,000. So she actually scared them away from robbing anything in St. Albans, which I think is awesome. This was her home for several years. Mr. Hereford built it in 1918. He died shortly thereafter. Eventually the Burdette family moved in, and now it's owned by a new family. But all residents of this house have reported hearing and seeing strange things. In fact, my friend who lives there now says that she hears footsteps even when she's the only person in the house. Other people who are residents of St. Albans who've driven by, even when this home was unoccupied, have reported seeing Mrs. Hereford, or at least an older lady's profile, in the window where Mrs. Hereford once lived, in the bedroom. Welcome to the home of what was once St. Albans' only college, Shelton College, built by the Baptist Association in order to be a preparatory school for anyone who wanted to attend seminary or go further in their education. Several state senators attended in its short-lived tenure. It's also served as a high school and a music school for females. But it's St. Albans' most haunted location. Everyone who's lived here has reported hearing or seeing a spirit. They don't feel like it's an evil spirit, more like a protective one, and in fact, several people have described her as the Pink Lady. They say she has a long flowing gown, long hair, and is enshrouded in an aura of pink. They've also seen her across the street at the cemetery, which is now on private land, but they say her baby was born here and is buried at the cemetery, and that's why she visits. Contractors also reported several years ago hearing children crying, and there were no children about. So this beautiful home, built in the 1880s, is one of St. Albans' most beautiful, and it's located on an area we call, you guessed it, College Hill. We're here at the iconic Lantz Lumber building on the corner of 4th Avenue and 5th Street. I'll zoom in. This building, of course, was not always abandoned like this. It was once part of the booming lumber industry of St. Albans, West Virginia. Originally built to be a grocery store, It became an opera house before it was a lumber company. I'm here with my friend Barry Miller, who wants to tell you about an experience he had at Lantz Lumber. Go ahead, Barry.
Okay, I was going to get something to eat like over there at Taco Bell, and I was looking over here in the corner and I saw like a shadow going right to left. Then it went left, going where the wall is, where it has no window at. Then it disappeared.
Interesting. So you really think this building is haunted, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so be on the lookout, St. Albans, as you drive by it. Don't you think, Barry?
Yeah.
Barry actually has a Facebook page about Lantz Lumber Haunted Tales, and I'll include that in the resource links. So feel free to look that up, and if you have a story about Lantz Lumber, I know Barry would like to hear it, and so would I. Barry is with the St. Albans On Purpose project, so we're so glad to have him as part of this year's tour.